I dare say you are wondering why I am floating around London like this. I am on the famous Thames River, investigating a murder.
It's a woman!
Another necktie murder.
For every promotional gimmick, there is always food for thought courtesy of the master of suspense, Sir Alfred Hitchcock. And in his penultimate movie from 1972, he managed to serve up another murderous menu. Frenzy presents not such a great Britain, in an age where marriage is hell, cynical observations and casual slurs on class becoming almost inseparable from the homicidal waste products of society. Alas, some things never change.
What exactly is in this soup?
Why, don't you like it?
It's delicious. Ingredients are somewhat mystifying.
This is not quite official serial killer territory, a term coined 2 years later by FBI agent Robert Ressler, and therefore the procedural elements are not only cack-handed, but through the script there is a tone that clearly illustrates the inappropriate attitudes of the time.
He rapes them first, doesn't he?
Yes, I believe he does.
Oh, well, I suppose it's nice to know that every cloud has a silver lining.
A black sense of humour, to say the least. I'm your tour guide, Rich Johnson, this time exploring more familiar territory by way of a trip to London. For many, this is England, and if the establishment would have you believe, nothing much else seems to exist outside of the capital. Hitchcock centering the narrative through a nostalgic snapshot only a director returning to his roots could infuse. It's a simple plot. Blamed for a spout of killings, including his ex-wife and girlfriend, waspish and washed-up ex-RAF officer Richard Blaney, John Finch, fresh off Polanski's bloodbath Macbeth, becomes Hitchcock's archetypal wrong man when he is accused of being the necktie murderer.
You've got to face the camera the whole time, until the very end when she goes by the camera and you pan round with her. She goes in this door, but she's full face the whole time. She'll look off, she'll be profile when she looks off down the alley.
A somewhat overlooked work from the Hitchcock filmography, it happens to be one of his best, and although the script occasionally beats you over the head, the masterful direction more than makes up for it, along with cinematographer Gil Taylor, who would go on to work with George Lucas 5 years later on Star Wars, here painting the details perfectly, from the fruits of evil to the horrors of vegetables. As far as establishing shots are concerned, it's the nostalgia that pulls us into Frenzy. Henry Mancini's original and more foreboding score, rightfully replaced by Ron Goodwin's Elgar-inspired Salute. The opening cements a number of things. Firstly, it does what most great directors achieve in luring their audience in, embracing a romanticism that is about to be shattered. Secondly, we become the bystanders and immediately see through the eyes of visitors rather than Hitchcock's own voyeurism. And thirdly, Hitchcock's murderous eye delivers his most lurid and violent affair, a killer obsession that he returned to time and time again.
You're my type. You are. Yes. You are my type.
Aside from the Lost films, his second feature, The Lodger, A Story of the London Fog, from 1927, was a silent movie that already defined some of the themes and characteristics he would go on to explore. He would often refer to knowing your own limitations when it came to his technique and expertise, somewhat downplaying their importance and his impact as a filmmaker. His more heinous movies would become a fascinating study and precursor to the psychological terror he would become known for. Often self-contained and meticulously designed, Hitchcock would go on to deliver more killer movies, with his personal favourite, Shadow of a Doubt in 1943, then pushed the camera, staging and gimmickry with 1948 Rope,
By what right did you dare decide that that boy in there was inferior and therefore could be killed? Did you think you were God, Brandon?
Before a double dose of Hitch from 1954 with Rear Window and Dial M for Murder, the latter shot in 3D. Salivating for more good old-fashioned murder, by the time he shoots a certain shower scene in 1959, he is fully tooled, ushering in the 60s with Psycho, one of the most influential films of all time.
I hope they are watching. They'll see. They'll see and they'll know, and they'll say, why, she wouldn't even harm a fly.
However, in terms of a comparative study, parallels to Frenzy align more with who and what he inspired, even bearing a closer resemblance to Michael Powell's Peeping Tom. Actress Anna Massey also there to remind us.
Whatever I photograph, I always lose.
Despite a strong lead into the 60s, many notable failures would lead Hitchcock to push things further in an effort to reinvent himself once again.
Right here, front row.
Bruce Russell of Reuters News Agency. What is the mandatory retirement age for a director in Hollywood?
I would say real 12.
From 1964 to 1968, he developed Kaleidoscope, aka Kaleidoscope Frenzy, which showed some threads that would spill over into his 1972 film. Having become obsessed with the work of Michelangelo Antonioni, specifically 1964's Red Desert and 1966 Blow Up, this was intended to be more explicit blood and guts than psychological, centered around a gay bodybuilder who murdered his victims next to water. Abandoned after shooting 4 reels of test footage in and around New York, Universal deemed the project untouchable, and Hitchcock took several years to reset and retool as an adaptation of Arthur Le Burn's 1966 novel Goodbye Piccadilly, Farewell Leicester Square. Adapted by English playwright and novelist Anthony Shaffer, who also wrote Sleuth and cult classic The Wicker Man from 1973, the project was good to go on an estimated $2 million budget. During the late 60s and early 70s, it was becoming more and more notable how much European filmmakers inspired by Alfred Hitchcock were pushing the envelope with the likes of Mario Bava's Giallo and proto-slashers, from 1964's Blood and Blacklace to 1971's A Bay of Blood.
What if it fails?
It won't fail.
But it is by way of Richard Fleischer's The Boston Strangler from 1968 and 10 Rillington Place that offers the most accurate comparisons to Frenzy, both thematically and in their mechanics.
Do you feel a bit dizzy?
I do a bit.
Yes, well, that's all the goodness taking effect. Breathe, Muriel. Breathe. No, Muriel. No. Breathe, Muriel.
Rillington, released the year before in 1971, is also London-centric, albeit more enclosed and, for want of a better word, more suffocating in its depiction of John Christie's crimes.
No.
Both Frenzy and Rillington were directed with the same detachment one would expect by both a US filmmaker and a returning Brit, and lend something truly cinematic to the proceedings. The son of a grocer, the sense of homecoming for Hitchcock not only brings his lineage as a filmmaker, but, almost by default, reminds us of the most infamous killers of all, from Jack the Ripper to Christie.
Well, we haven't had a good, juicy series of sex murders since Christie, and they're so good for the tourist trade.
Unleashed from Hollywood's backlots, here the streets of London are brought violently to life at the start of a new decade in Britain that highlights chains of command, specifically the pomposity of the established elite. Rillington succeeds in showing a more kitchen sink assembly, whereas Frenzy is more about the spivs and the toughs. Similarly, the establishment can be seen explicitly dismantled in other British horror of the time, such as Gary Sherman's Deathline, also from 1972, and John Landis's An American Werewolf in London from 1981, two films with distinct monstrous underground killers and bowler hats.
What did I do last night?
This is the famous London wholesale fruit and vegetable market, Covent Garden. Here you may buy the fruits of evil and the horrors of vegetables.
For all the skill and potency Psycho's shower scene has, the death of Brenda Blaney showcases Hitchcock at his most brutal, the key moment chopped up into intricately designed shots that took 3 days to shoot. Free from the shackles of the Hays Code, it demonstrates where the master of suspense could have gone from here, navigating and perhaps even redefining slasher territory by way of Bava and Argento, his bloodlust rekindled. You only have to read about and look behind the scenes to see how uncomfortably close he gets.
Slowly, slowly, hands slowly, split the hands drop, eyes begin to stare, then the eyes stare, open, open.
Yeah, he's right in there. We only need to experience this the once. Schaefer handling Barbara's death with a careful reminder of dialogue.
I don't know if you know, Babs, but you're my type of woman.
The act of murder already explicitly planted, as Hitchcock then retreats with the camera leaving the kill to play out in the minds of the audience. Yet, for all the horror on display in Frenzy, the most revolting parts of the film are laid out on the dinner table, highlighting a detached, conservative mindset of the period. Alec McGowan's more relatable Chief Inspector Tim Oxford is the light relief as he makes the most of a hearty English breakfast away from home until politely appeasing his wife with her gourmet cooking.
Quail with grapes.
We've got to find him before his appetite is whetted again.
Mrs. Oxford's culinary delights are full-on Fanny Craddock as she serves her husband.
What does your intuition tell you I want for dinner tonight?
Offering a woman's wisdom as he chews on the case.
Well, the corpse was deep in rigor mortis. He had to break the fingers of the right hand to retrieve what they held.
It's enough to make one gag. Frenzy may leave somewhat of a foul aftertaste, but in picking at our teeth afterwards, one cannot escape seeing a masterful piece of cinema. What we have come to know of Alfred Hitchcock and his distinct personality brings up questions of where the lines are drawn, his public persona and perverse nature, somewhat inseparable, and, in the final throes of his career, unbound from censorship, was free to indulge himself all the more. Of course, that glimpse of what was to come now only lives on in his inheritors.
Here, what's wrong? Who is it?
Perhaps you can tell us.
Look, he's wearing my tie.